You have no idea what I'm capable of.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another week of custom card reviews. Kicking things off, we've got the Smart Ogre, a 1-mana 4/4 neutral minion has 50% chance to attack the wrong character. Design 4 stars, balance I think 5 stars. This is obviously a callback to the Ogre effects with the 50% chance to attack the wrong, usually enemy, though this one importantly has a distinction where it says it has a 50% chance to attack the wrong character, meaning it can actually attack your own face or your own minions, which is what really balances out this card. Obviously a 1-mana 4/4 is a lot of stats this early on in the game, but I don't think it's completely unprecedented. We actually had that 1-mana 4 free, I believe, from Sunken City that had can't attack. So obviously they aren't opposed to printing high-statted 1-cost minions in the neutral set. And I think this card's downside is big enough to justify its stat line, and I think it even having a little more stats than that Hermit Crab of old does indeed help the card out a little bit. You want that maybe a little bit extra survivability on the minion so you can actually get to attack with it. I don't think this card's that good, but I don't think that's a bad thing either. I would hate to see this card be extremely good because of how random it is, but I think it's at that right point where it's interesting maybe in silence archetypes like Silence Priest, but maybe even a little better way of pushing those archetypes than we've seen in the past, as those ones haven't worked out too well. Yeah, I like the design on this card. My only little thing for the actual design aspect of it is its name is, not the most creative thing in the world. Smart Ogre, just being like, haha, he's not actually smart, so we put it in quotes. I don't think that's the cleverest of things, but I'm not going to dock too much on the design there, just because, names are hard to come up with sometimes, and that's okay. But I like this card otherwise, and I think it would be interesting to see. Up next, we've got Toy Bishop Benedictus, a 6-mana legendary minion for Rogue and Priest, with your deck size is 20, and start of game, add a copy of 10 cards from your opponent's deck into yours, set their cost and stats to 1. Also, it is a 4/6 itself, it has a 4/6 body. Design 1 star, balance 1 star. My issue with the design on this card, just to start things off here, is I don't see why this is a rogue and a priest card. I get their effects. The effect kind of makes sense there. Rogues like to steal cards, priests like to copy cards from their opponent. So that makes sense to me, but having Benedictus be the character really doesn't make sense to me. He doesn't really have anything to do with Thief Priest in general, and he definitely has nothing to do with Rogue. So I would have definitely figured out a better character to represent this effect with. Also design-wise, having it say add a copy of 10 cards from your opponent's deck and set their stats to 1 as a downside doesn't really work, because you can get spells off of this, and every spell that you copy off of this is going to be inherently better than the minions, because the minions are getting their stats set to 1 as well, while the spells are remaining exactly the same. So I think that's a little bit of a weirdness in the design. I would also question... I was going to say I would also question how it would work with locations, but I'd assume that their durability would get set to 1. So that's how I'm assuming that would work. But also, balance-wise, I think this card is extremely powerful. The variance on this card, at the start of the game, when you shuffle those 10 cards in, you could immediately draw a 1-mana spell that summons a whole board of minions, like the Scourge, and that would be, nobody's running the Scourge in their deck anymore because Toy Bishop Benedictus exists. The same can be said for big 1-mana or big 10-mana Death Rattle minions that are now getting their stats and cost set to 1, playing that 10-mana Rusher guy that summons the 8/8 on the Death Rattle is pretty crazy. There's a lot of big cards that just do not work with this and would be horrible to see top decked on turn 1 and played on turn 1, which is why the balance of this card completely is completely wrong here. I don't know exactly how you salvage this. I think maybe you get rid of the set their cost and stats to one part. I think that would make the card a little interesting. And I would also recommend, if you're going to keep it a rogue card, I honestly don't think you have to. I would pick maybe a unique character or just make up a character. Benedictus doesn't really fit rogue. Up next, we've got one of those big spells I was talking about that you could maybe shuffle in with Benedictus. We've got Echoes of the Pantheon, a 10 mana legendary mage spell that summons 7 random titans and destroys them at the end of your turn. Design 1 star, balance 1 star. It's kind of cool. I admit that it is kind of cool to summon a full board of titans with 1 card, but that is also like very ridiculous. There are so many different things you could get off of that. Eonar refreshes your mana crystals. You could discover a million minions. You could remove the whole board. There's a lot of things you can do with the titans that I think even for 10 mana, this does way too much and is completely bonkers, especially if you can somehow cheat this out early. If you can copy this card and play it multiple times, I think it's insane. But I think even just on its own, it's really, really, really strong. Like, there's very little times that this is going to whiff for you, and I feel like you're always going to be able to do something pretty crazy with this. And for that reason, I think the balance has got to be 1 stars. Design-wise, also, I feel like this feels just like a duel's treasure and not more like a collectible card. It's just such a big effect that I feel like it would be more of a reward for like a quest line or something than just a card you can just put into any deck, which is why I think the balance and the design are a little off on here. So there's a couple of issues I have with the design on this one, and then the balance is just very far off as well. But following those 2 cards, we actually have my favorite card of this week, Defective Neotron, a 1 mana 1/2 mech with, at the start of your turn, gain Taunt and Divine Shield. Very simple, very easy to understand, not too crazy, but just really well designed, I think. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. I don't really have much to note on this card. I think it's just a really neat callback to a Neotron. I think it's a very playable card as well. It's a 1 mana 1/2 that can be very sticky and hard to deal with if you can bump up its stats. It's a mech, so it's got that going for it as well. You can magnetize stuff onto this. You could just play it with other mech synergy cards, and I think it fits really well. I really love the flavor and the balance on this card. I'd love to use it in my mech decks that I have. So yeah, I think the only little thing that I would note maybe is that, you know, it gaining Taunt each turn doesn't really make sense, but I get why. You know, they wanted it to be a defective Neotron, so it doesn't even have Taunt at the start. I think it could. I don't know if that's actually a better thing for it to have Taunt at the start, which is why I'm not taking anything off. I think this card is perfectly designed as it is, and yeah, I love this card a lot. And up next, we've got Express Shipping, a 1 mana neutral spell with draw 2 minions and give them -1/-1. Design 3 stars, balance I think 1 star. My one issue with this, the design on this card is I don't really understand why it's a neutral spell. Like, we've only seen 1 neutral spell in all of Hearthstone so far. And maybe I'm wrong in assuming that we won't see more of them soon, but I feel like this one is just, like, it's not exciting enough to warrant being a neutral spell. And also, it adds a very reliable tutor to neutral, which I don't know if that's something we could see currently in the game. I think it's something we might see more of in the future, but adding a minion tutor that's this cheap into neutral, I think would have a lot of consequences. A lot of decks could very reliably get out the things that they need that normally wouldn't be able to tutor out things like this. I think the biggest comparison this card can be made with is Switcheroo for Priest. That card saw a good amount of play, mainly when it was a little more broken, before they nerfed it a lot. But even I've seen it a couple of times just used to tutor out some minions, and while Priest may not be the best class to do that, I think there are a lot of classes that would really benefit from being able to tutor out minions really cheap and this early in the game, and they won't really care for the downside too much. So for that reason, I think the balance is a little off here. I would maybe make it 2 or maybe even free mana because it's a neutral card. Obviously, if this was a class card, I think this card is probably all right. I think it's even still maybe a little good, maybe still be 2 mana, but I think it could be 1 mana in some classes, like maybe Rogue or Druid that already have access to a lot of card draw. This wouldn't be too ridiculous for them, but in neutral, I think this is a little spooky. Up next, we've got Ire, yeah, Planeseeker, a 1 mana 8/1 with Dormant for free turns, and when this awakens, land on the highest health enemy minion, which the creator of this card did confirm that means that it just attacks the minion, essentially. But it would have a cool animation where it like falls on top of it and deals its damage, and I'm assuming takes retaliation damage as well. Design 4 stars. I like this card's design quite a bit, but balance, I think like 3 stars. Like, it doesn't seem too good to me, honestly. I think it's a little weak. 1 mana, deal 8 to the highest health enemy minion in free turns is very slow. And for it to be a legendary card that does this, it's not the most exciting thing, which is why I took off a point on design. I don't know how exciting this card is and how many decks would actually want to run it. I think maybe making it dormant for 2 turns helps a little bit. Even then, still, I think it's a very slow card that I don't feel really is justified for being that slow. I would personally, I think a big rework would be in order, maybe getting rid of the dormant and upping the cost and having it be like a battle cry that it lands on something. I'm not sure, maybe like battle cry at the start of your opponent's turn, land on the minion or something. I don't know exactly how I would personally do this, but I don't hate this, how this is done as it is right now. I think it's very fun and flavorful. I just don't know how playable it would be. And next we've got Soulbound Crush, a 5 mana 7/5 undead beast for Death Knight, and it's a Unholy Blood and Frost Rune card, so for the Rainbow Death Knights out there. It's got charge and spend 5 corpses to attack. So mechanically, I believe how this works is that whenever you attack with this card, you have to have 5 corpses, and it would spend those 5 corpses when it's attacking. Design 3 stars, balance like 1 star. This card is a very all over the place in my opinion. I think there are a lot of things that are off about this card. It being 1 of each rune feels weird and unnecessary. I don't think that is warranted for this effect. Speaking of its effect as well, having it be spend 5 corpses to attack doesn't really fit in with current wording of how cards like this would function. But I also don't know exactly how you would word it. You would have to have it say like, can't attack unless you have 5 corpses. After this attack, spend 5 corpses. But that's very wordy, and so I get why they went this direction for the wording of it. Personally, what I would do with this card is take off maybe the Blood and Frost, or maybe just take off the Frost Rune, and maybe push it down to a 5/5, and have it be Battle Cry, spend 5 corpses to gain charge, perhaps. That would be a little more balanced and less confusing wording-wise. And I don't think it needs to spend 5 corpses each time it attacks. Some decks might actually see that as an upside, like Rainbow Death Knight would actually like to be spending a lot of corpses, and so spending them each time this attacks could actually be a good thing, which I don't think you really want to promote with this card. I think you'd rather just have it be a cool big minion you can play that gains charge if you have a certain amount of corpses. I think that was the intent with this card. So yeah, I think this card has a couple of problems, but overall I like the idea of it. I think the design is kind of neat, kind of pushes back to that charged Devil Soar card from Ungoro, where it's got charge, but it's got this restriction on the charge as well, so you want to try to figure out how you can best utilize it. So yeah, I like it quite a bit still. And here we've got another card I like quite a bit. We've got Tedy Lieutenant, a 4-mana 4/3 neutral epic with Battle Cry, draw your lowest cost minion, give it +3 attack, and a gun. And the example they gave was a 4/1 Snow Flipper Penguin with a gun. Obviously a callback to the new card that was just revealed a couple of days ago, Character Artist, which draws your highest cost minion and gives it a mustache, but this one gives it a gun, and obviously since it has a gun, it's a little more threatening on the board. Design 5 stars. I really like the pun. I know I'm a sucker for puns. Balance, I think 4 stars. I would actually say this card might actually be really good. Like a 4-mana 4/3 with a tutor effect and a little bit of a buff as well. Seems pretty good for neutral. And I mean, we've seen Witchwood Piper as the card to compare this to, obviously, a 4-mana 3/3 that just drew your lowest cost minion. Witchwood Piper was never that good, so I could see this being a little more powerful and giving the hand buff. But I would maybe push this down to a 3/3 as well, or maybe make the attack buff +2 attack, just because I think it is a lot of stats for this minion alongside a card draw that is also a tutor. So I think this card does do quite a lot. Obviously, it's made as a joke. It's not to be taken too seriously. But I actually think it's pretty close to being balanced. Next, we've got Rap Battle. The wrong kind of rap here, by the way. It's a 2-mana rogue spell with reveal a minion in each player's deck. If yours has more words in its text, draw 3 cards. So, really cool effect. Design 2 stars. And I like the design of this card a lot, but there's a reason I'm taking off a lot of points on design for this one. Balance, I think 1 star. Or maybe 2 stars. I'm gonna keep it at 1 for now, but the balance is a little off on this card as well. But the problem with the design on this card, which I know it's been pointed out to death in the comments of this card, so I'm sorry for re-bringing it up, but I just want to point it out for everyone here. This card does not work inherently due to the translations that happen with each card when they are put into other languages. Some languages obviously will have more words in their text for a card than another language will. And so inherently this effect doesn't really work. I really like the idea of it, which is why I'm still giving it 2 stars in design, even though the design just does not work with Hearthstone. I still really like the idea. And a comment actually did point out that it is maybe a little salvageable. You could have it be reveal a minion in each player's deck. If yours has more keywords in it, draw 3 cards. That would work, since, you know, every keyword is going to be the same across all languages. So that would be a way to fix this card. But as it is, I really like the idea of it. I wish it worked, but sadly, just the localization will completely mess up the effect on this card. But for the balance of this card as well, a little hard to gauge. It's 2 mana, do nothing, or 2 mana, draw 3, and it's really hard to control. As it is right now, if we're saying in a perfect world where somehow there wasn't a problem with the effect and it worked, even so, it'd be really a little strange to run this card. You'd have to run a lot of high word card minions in your deck, which I don't think Rogue will ever just do for this one card. And also, you're just at the complete whims of RNG on this one. Like, there's no control here. Usually, for cards like this, I think that the Warrior one is the best example, that reveals 3 cards from your deck and draws you a card for each one that costs more. You have a little bit of control, but this one, your control is including cards in your deck that have a ton of words, which is really hard to do, I think, and would be not the most intuitive deck design just for this one card. So for those reasons, I think the balance is far off, and also the effect just doesn't really work for this one, even though it is really cool. And finally here, we've got Zephrus the Hilarious, a 2 mana free 2 legendary neutral elemental with Battle Cry. If your deck has no duplicates, cast a really funny spell. And the funny spells that they gave as examples are cards like Myra's Unstable Element or Tree of Life, Void Contract, Deck of Lunacy, Psychic Scream, Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. Just a bunch of funny spells that will do kind of chaotic things the turn you play Zephrus. Really cool card. I'm going to give the design 4 stars, and I think the balance is 1 star. I think this card is incredibly weak. Because it casts a random funny spell, it's just, you're at the complete whims of whatever Zephrus will do. It maybe will destroy your deck, or fully heal your opponent, or cast Astral Communion. There's very few of these that you actually want to happen, and I don't think it's got this big no duplicate requirement. So for those reasons, I think the card would never be played. I think it is incredibly weak. I think you can fix it. You might not like what I suggest to fix it, though. I would really like to be able to pick between 3 of the funny spells to at least cast, so then I can have a little bit of control in what is going to happen. Or maybe you could, honestly, you could have it cast the funny spell for your opponent. That might actually be better than having it cast for you, because a lot of these spells are very destructive and would mess with your opponent a lot. I think for a 2-mana free 2, that might be a little crazy. Even the pick the spell that you get to cast might be a little crazy for a 2-mana free 2 here. But you could always up the cost or something to make it more justified. But right now, as it works, I think this card is completely unplayable. Very funny. I like how it is a fun callback to Zephrus in a very different way, but I think it's very much unplayable. But yeah, with that, that is all of our cards for this week. Got through this one a little quicker than normal, and yeah, I've been really enjoying doing this series. We're on episode 5 here, which means we've officially covered the top custom cards of the last month. But as always, if you want to see more, leave a like on the video, comment down below what your favorite card was. But yeah, if you're really enjoying, be sure to subscribe. We post one of these each week, and I've got more videos that I've got planned as soon as I get some more free time on my hands. But thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all again very soon.